Welcome to Modern Anarchy, the podcast exploring sex, relationships, and liberation. I'm your host, Dr. Nicole.
I tried to keep her quiet, but she's screaming inside of me. I tried to keep her hiding, oh, shut up. I tried to keep her quiet, but she's a wild, wild woman.
On today's episode, we have Shai. Join us for a conversation about expanding the capacity of our cultural imagination. Together we talk about the spectrum of non-monogamy, the Olympics of relationships, and how to support yourself and others through the expansion process. Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to Modern Anarchy. I am so delighted to have all of you pleasure activists from around the world tuning in for another episode each Wednesday. My name is Dr. Nicole. I am a sex and relationship psychotherapist providing psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, author of the Psychedelic Jealousy Guide, and founder of The Pleasure Practice, supporting individuals in crafting expansive sex lives and intimate relationships. Dear listener, our failure of imagination, it's very, very true. As an anarchist, right, it is our job to be confident in the truth that another world is possible. For example, right, what would a world look like where we didn't use money? If you try to imagine it for a moment, honestly, when I try to imagine it, my mind shudders at the thought. How could we? What would we exchange? Would we go back to bartering? What would this look like? What would it look like, right? And my brain falters. And it's hard to imagine a world outside of capitalism, outside the use of money, right? And so when I think back to my journey with coming into non-monogamy, I truly had a very similar reaction. I had no capacity to imagine anything else. And that's why I'm so grateful to be in this space, dear listener, to tell you another story. There's another way. I'm living proof of that. The guests on this show are living proof of that. And so are you. Because you're tuning in, which means I know you're here. So hell yes to that, okay? There's so much liberation work to do. And so we have to have compassion for ourselves, right? The failure of imagination, it's not our fault. We are the fish in water, right? And some of us wake up to realize that, and then we got to clean up that water, right? It's not going to be easy. There is no point in the journey where unlearning systems of oppression is easy, okay? So you gotta get comfortable with that and then step into more communities. I'm so glad you're here in this community, learning and growing and expanding and finding people in your life that you can learn and grow and expand with. That is the secret. That is the medicine. And I hope for you that you find those people and that you build those communities, because that's the politics right there. That's how we're going to make waves and change the society. And I'm so grateful that you're a part of that movement, dear listener. All right, dear listener, if you are ready to liberate your pleasure, you can explore my offerings and free resources at modernanarchypodcast.com, linked in the show notes below. And I want to say the biggest thank you to all my Patreon supporters. You are supporting the long-term sustainability of the podcast, keeping this content free and accessible to all people. So thank you. And with that, dear listener, please know that I am sending you all my love, and let's tune in to today's episode. Dear listener, there's a space already waiting for you where you are invited to let go of every old script about sex and relationships and begin living a life rooted in your pleasure, empowerment, and deep alignment. I'm Dr. Nicole, and this is your invitation to the Pleasure Liberation Groups, a transformative, educational, and deeply immersive experience designed for visionary individuals like you. Together, we'll gather in community to explore desire, expand relational wisdom, and embody the lives we're here to lead. Each session is woven with practices, teachings, and the kind of connection that makes real transformation possible. And I'll be right there with you, guiding the process with an embodied curriculum that supports both personal and collective liberation. This is your invitation into the next chapter of your erotic evolution. Say yes to your pleasure and visit modernanarchypodcast.com/pleasure practice to apply. And so then the first question that I ask every guest is, how would you introduce yourself to the listeners?
I would introduce myself as someone who's had such a rich lived experience transitioning from monogamy to the spectrum of consensual non-monogamy. And that created such inspiration that I built community. I brought in top experts in education and developed this really, I think, impactful process to help others. So it's become my life's work. It's become my mission. It's what I wake up feeling really juicy about, to be in service, to help people with those, that journey.
Well, I'm excited to have you today and get to unpack all of that.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
So take me back to when you first heard of polyamory. What was your, you're already smiling. What was your reaction, your reception? I'm curious.
Oh my gosh. It's a little blurry. Like, I knew that something felt off for so many years, right? Like, I was traditional monogamy, the house, the two kids,
Right.
We were just missing the white picket fence, but we had everything, right? Yeah, I joked that we had like two of us and privileged, so privileged, 2 horses, 2 dogs, 2 chickens, 2 cars, everything came in twos, right? 2 kids. And then but something was always missing for me, right? Like the perfect life was not so perfect. I couldn't explain why, because my heart just wanted to love more. It always wanted to love more and felt so contracted and like not being able to express my desire, my affinity towards other women in my case. And when I think I want to say the show Big Love on HBO, which was about polygamy, was like, whoa, what? That's a thing. But, in the back of my mind, that's more of a religious construct, not really my thing. Something didn't resonate with like it only being, like one directional with a man who had like, I think it was 3 or 4 wives. And then the show on Showtime called Polyamory, Married and Dating with Kamala Devi was just like, aha, that's it. And then I have to admit, not a huge book reader, but all of a sudden I became one. I read a book somehow I ended up with reading Shameless. I think Pamela Matson wrote that. And then Mating in Captivity.
Yeah.
Esther Perel, Myth of Monogamy, and then Sex at Dawn. So I like went through these books like in such a voracious appetite to read all of a sudden.
Yep.
Because the subject was just like so resonant for me. I was just like, my gosh. And yeah, it was like, this makes sense. This makes sense. This makes sense. I still didn't have it all pieced together like I did years later.
Sure.
I'll share about that another time. But when I heard about it, I was just like so thrilled. It's a different story in terms of like what my wife thought about it.
Yeah, you want to share?
Yeah, she was like, at first like, oh, interesting. But then when she saw how serious I was, she was like, hell to the no, that's not for me. Like, do you want a freaking divorce? Like, what do you want? And I was like, no,
Mm,
no, 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 no divorce, no divorce. Just, oh, okay, let me stuff this down, because I don't want to break up a happy home.
right.
But for some reason, the conversation kept popping up. It kept festering, like it just wouldn't release. And it ended up being like a 3-year conversation.
Mhm.
We're going back like 15 years ago. And inside of that, I was able to dip my toes into the non-monogamy waters by getting exclusions for sensual massages.
Sure.
I try to find tantrikas so I could learn a little bit, so it could be educational, learn about tantra, learn about my body, and had those experiences for 3 years. And that felt almost like putting a band-aid on my ultimate strategy of wanting to be polyamorous. And yeah, it was a good band-aid for 3 years until it was just like, I really can't just do the physical. I need the emotional also. But yeah, I'd love to hear about you. Like, how did you feel when you first heard about it? How did you hear about it?
Yeah, I think I'd shared with you before we started the recording that I came from purity culture, right? So the first time that I had had sex with anybody outside of marriage, I cried. I had been given have you heard of the paper test?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, so I went to a Christian high school and so my sex education, I kid you not, was truly a man getting up on stage with a pink paper and a blue piece of paper and then gluing them together and saying, this is what happens when you have sex. You have two people that come together and they're bonded. And then when you try to break away from that person, they ripped the papers in half and said, you leave parts of yourself with the other person. And who would want the shredded up piece of paper? So that was hands down my sex education was you have sex with one person for the rest of your life or you're damaged. Which, as a psychotherapist now, I think about just the pain of people who had experienced, sure, great sex, pleasurable sex, and now felt like they were being told they were broken and damaged, let alone people who had experienced assault and were being told that they were broken. And I mean, the messaging is so problematic, but I believed it for so long. And so when I had sex outside of marriage, I was sobbing. I just felt like no one would ever love me.
Oh, oh
Truly.
my gosh.
Right? Well, why would you? I'm a shredded up piece of paper. Who wants
Yeah,
this? Right? That's what
yeah.
I was. So the idea of having sex with a second person in my life, wild. The idea of having sex with two people at the same time, separately, let alone orgies and other wild. So every bit of this journey has been a stretch of my imagination of what is possible. And so the first time I heard about polyamory, it was someone that I had just started dating and there was a lot of problems with this relationship, but he had mentioned it and I looked at him and I said, if you loved me, it would only be me and me forever. I would never do this.
Wow.
So that's where I started was absolutely not. Are you kidding me? Which I think when you look in my cultural context, that makes sense, right? And
Mhm.
so it took a little bit of time to realize that, oh, actually, I do have feelings for lots of people. The unique context of the experience was that an ex-boyfriend had reached back out to me while I was dating that person. So then I simultaneously started dating both. And then had this moment where I was like, oh shit, am I not also doing this? As I'm redating my ex, dating this new person. And then I had that sort of light bulb moment of, what if this is possible? And then all of the books, all of the podcasts, all of the things, a dissertation on relationship anarchy, hundreds of conversations on a podcast. And now here we are, But I think it's funny because people like ask me, oh, were you always poly? And I think it's very important to say, no, not at all. This was never even something I would have fathomed doing. And so people,
Yeah.
when I talk to my mom, who's still Mormon, she's like, I could never, I would feel such guilt and shame. And I'm always telling her, well, I want to honor that and also talk about your cultural positionality, right? Because that's also how I felt for so long.
So many people are not like born into this love style. They're not like, oh, I knew this since I was 12 years old. I was always like this. We were just like chugging along, going along to get along with society and others and never knowing. And then once you know, oof, it's like things start to line up, they start to make sense. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot of question about identity versus a practice of cultural, and I don't think we have to pin it too hard in any one camp. But if I were to have to make a guess, I would say it's cultural practice. Think about even just the research on bodies that we find attractive, right? If I ask someone, do you find this body attractive? They would say, yes, this is my innate sense of attraction and who I am and what I'm attracted to. And then when you take that into a global perspective, you see how it changes based on the cultural location of each person. And so I think that that's something that needs to be talked about, the ways where people say internally, no, I could never have multiple partners. That feels so innately wrong. And what does it mean to honor that? That, yeah, that body isn't attractive to you. And also, we are the products of our environment. And that is so deep within our subconscious that we can't even recognize often at times.
No, no, yeah. And may not, for some people, they just may not recognize it for their entire lifetime.
Right.
It's so ingrained and it's hard to shift. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, if you want me to continue my story, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, tell me more about kind of, yeah, where it went from that first initial point. I mean, if your wife wasn't on board, I guess I wanted to respond to about the Tantrika experience. There's so much power in getting to have a controlled container. I think a lot of people panic about polyamory and opening up and the sense that everything that they've built, the foundation of their relationship is just going to crumble, right? And so to have that controlled container with a tantrika, with a surrogate partner, with a sexological body worker, all these people that fill that sort of role where it's a very controlled, a pro dom, right? A very controlled space. I think it's often a door opener to sexual freedom, and then the rest kind of follows suit, as you're saying.
Yeah. So interesting. Remind me to tell you later on. I'm just going to track it here in my notes that as part of our growing program, I'm going to possibly have our first experience with a poly surrogate.
Cool.
So it's literally bringing in one of our practitioners who is a tantrika and super educated on all the things, you know, all the intimacy, like a sex educator who's actually going to join into a relationship with a couple, but professionally. So
Yeah.
there's going to be authentic intimacy, perhaps, because it'll be organic. But
Hmm.
it'll also be in the context of a professional engagement where they're paying for the service on a monthly retainer. But it'll allow them to have kind of like the polysurrogacy experience where just it feels real, but there's that like exit of that this is a professional arrangement, a contract can end at any time. It's not as scary and open-ended as it has more predictability to it. So yeah, I'll let you know how it goes.
Sure.
We end up having this engagement, but we're creating new things for our clients, and this is one of them.
Mhm.
So oh gosh, so many chapters to my story, but I'll try to be efficient here. So after there was 3 years of discussion about, I'm going to say September 20, maybe August 2013, somebody gave me a clue and they said, actually, it was a tantrika who said to me, hey, you know, if you really want your wife to open up her mind, if you're really stuck, help her have her experience first.
Mm,
I'm like, okay, do you know anyone? She's like, yeah, almost like a poly surrogate type situation.
sure.
I know a DACA in Sedona, and I'm like, okay, thank you for the lead. I reach out, I sponsor the trip for her to go out to Sedona a couple of times, and then she ends up going to Chicago and ends up almost like falling in love with this DACA. Like they were like on an actual date in Chicago,
Hmm.
and then she comes home. I'll never forget it. It was around August, September of 2013. And she says, well, if you can't beat them, join them. I think I understand what you've been saying for 3 years. I feel this love and I feel love for you. Let's write down some rules. We write
Hmm.
down like 3 rules, not knowing that DIYing this whole thing is risky. None of the support that we now give our clients, none of the education, none of the attachment informed, polysecure was not out. We
Right.
were just like, yeah, wear a condom and don't use our marital bed. Like that's the extent of our knowledge of how to prepare. So within 2 months, she goes into a full-on relationship, like another primary partner. Within 4 months, I do the same. And within 7 months, she asked me for a divorce
Well,
after 18 years together. And to be honest, parts of me were prepared for that risk. I was hurt.
yeah.
But the hardest part was sitting down our 5 and 10-year-old kids and saying,
Mm,
Mom and Dad are divorcing, and them crying, like, what? You guys love each other. We're a family. Like, because they didn't know any. They assumed we
right.
were fine. I assumed we were fine, right?
Right.
So I joked that I did the next logical thing. I didn't want a broken home. So I said to my wife, hey, I'm going to invite your boyfriend to move in with us. And I'm going to invite my girlfriend to move in with us. And everyone said yes. And all of a sudden, 8 of us are living together,
Wow.
4 adults, 4 kids. We did it for 3 years and we really got along. Again, I'm naming privilege. I had a beautiful property at the time. Don't have it now, but it was a beautiful property that had plenty of space. So we weren't living in like a 2-bedroom apartment. It was
Hmm.
8 of us and we made it work. We got along. We learned a lot. She wanted to finalize the divorce 3 years in. She moved out with her boyfriend 2 years later. They broke up right before COVID. And I'm like, just move back in. I don't want to do this like dropping the kids off back and forth. It's better for everyone.
Yeah.
The hard part was that I now had transitioned to full on poly, and I was living with two of my partners, Leah and Chrissy, for that lasted about 6 years. So I was living with, communal poly in a way,
Sure.
and brought in my ex-wife came back in and we actually did great. I mean, there was so many sweet moments with the three of them holding space for each other, supporting each other. Um, so we moved through COVID, and then as relationships would have, I transitioned with Chrissy and then eventually with Leah. And now I live with my ex-wife. We decided to downsize, get a smaller place, and I live with my ex-wife. We've been living together for a year and a half. And my kids, who were 5 and 10 when we started, are now 15 and 20.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, almost living with like three other adults, and
Mm-hmm.
tons of love, flexibility. We've even taken a trip together, as a family. So very sweet. And I'm continuing my dance with relationships, did
Mm-hmm.
some solo poly for a while. Now I'm deepening, but there's also some other connections, and like you said, an old girlfriend, and just so many things that are still so rich in my life. But yeah, that's my journey. That's my personal journey. There's obviously many, many, many chapters in that story, but gosh, I've grown so much. I'm not, you wouldn't recognize me,
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's been
Good.
neat.
Good. Yeah. Change is the only inevitable, right? So we hope it continues to keep coming for the better, right? That we continue to evolve and we grow in relationships. And so what a expansion process truly, right? What a journey. And yeah, as a feminist and someone that studies sex and relationships, there's just so much to say about your wife's journey and women, right? I think that women's sexuality is in a very clearly defined box, right? The Madonna and the whore, right? These are your two options. And living in our cultural context, what we were talking about earlier about, just even physical attraction, let alone attraction to multiple people and the way that culture influences that. So many women are locked in a box of this is what it means to be a good woman. This is how you live your life. You love one person. This is it. And I think that as someone who's walked out of that paradigm, the amount of times that despite my desire to walk out of that paradigm, I've had such desire, such shame, such guilt, such unconscious shit from all the societal messaging. And so it's so hard, I think, for women to see out another world. And yet there's also such a big movement right now of women leading poly, of women actually bringing the emotionality into the relationships and this whole space, let alone, I know we're not monkeys. I always, say that. But just the research on, I was reading it in Untrue by Wednesday Martin, just the research on monkeys and how when they created a more expansive cage for the monkeys, which reminds me a lot of my research with psychedelics and drug use in Rat Park. When you expanded the cage for the monkeys to have more room, the women were actually more pursuing of sexuality. But they found that after a certain amount of time, the women monkeys would get bored with sex. And so the researchers thought, what if we bring in new monkeys into the space? And the second they brought in new monkeys, the women's sexuality perked up again, right? But of course, we're not monkeys. There are human beings in this world right now that are not having sex for the 3-letter word of God, right? Like there are humans who make a vow and say, I'm going to be celibate for
Right.
God, right? And so we're not monkeys, to be very clear. However, whoa, when you think about the implications of that, and when I think about the drop of sexuality that happens, particularly for women in long-term relationships, when I think about the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Disorders, of Psychological Disorders, the DSM, it says that upwards of 42% of women are going to struggle with female orgasm disorder, which I hate that pathological lens, but we're talking about almost half of women. I'm just curious how many of us are in a box, because I was certainly in a box, and I find myself in long-term relationships struggling with desire that does not happen in novelty and new situations, right? And so I think that there's just so much to expand here. And so your wife having that experience, it allowed her to kind of understand what you were feeling, which, in the privilege as a man, there's so much more cultural narratives about access to this desire. Like as a man, you're told this is normal for you to want more, to want these other people. As a woman, that's not what I'm told, right? And so I think
Yeah.
that there's so much more for us to stretch to in access to
Yeah.
these things.
Wow. I'm going to go ahead and be a bit more vulnerable and open about it. My current dynamic,
Yeah.
dating someone who is so interesting. They've danced the dance of open and closed, and maybe you can help me
Yeah.
sort this out. But there's like they've been able, instead of one box, which is
Hmm.
monogamy, at least they have two boxes. One box says, I can be your lover. I can be in lovership with you, and you can do whatever you want because we are lovers and it's all good. And do you and I do me, and there's no quote unquote commitment to each other. And I honor your freedom. And then there's my desire to build a family.
Mm-hmm.
And then that box, I'm looking for monogamy. I'm looking for simplicity. I'm looking for somebody who wants to settle down. And we need to choose between these two boxes, like, because when it comes to building a family, there's meaning that's been made that openness is not designed for that. It's like the antithesis of a family. Openness it doesn't make sense. So it's interesting that there's an open-mindedness, and having been in a relationship with a man who was married, having been in a relationship with a man who was solo poly in a way, like having those experiences, but having a primary partner you want to build a life with is almost, it feels like a non-starter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to help without sounding too, like, I hate to say this, but like over convincing, over
Mm-hmm.
efforting, selling it. Like, how can we bring these two worlds together? And when you spoke about unconscious shame and guilt, maybe that's what's happening. It's like coming from a traditional family where, in that culture, she's seen arranged marriage energy
Sure.
in the lineage, right? So like how do you traverse these conversations without sounding like you've got a horse in a race and you just want them to blend these worlds and see that it's possible to have a family and be open?
Right. Yeah. I think, yeah, supporting people in their desires and asking deep questions. I think the first thing that was coming to mind for me is, what about the exclusivity gives you security? Like, what is that vision that you're seeing when you think about a family dynamic and the need for monogamy? What is that's giving to you? And I think this is where we can talk about a failure of imagination at certain points, which
Ooh, I like that phrase, a
I get
failure
that. Yeah, I fucking get that. I think in a lot of our societies, let's think about larger systems of power, right? Even thinking about a world outside of this massive, money gap where 49% of the world's worth, the 49% of the world's wealth is owned by 1% of the people. When we try to think about a world beyond that, I can't even fathom
right.
what our society would look like. And so we have a failure of imagination to even see that other world. So we say, no, I don't want that other paradigm. I don't even know what that looks like. So I would want to be asking that person, okay, when you see exclusivity, what is that giving for you? Is it security? Is it control? Is it a sense of there's a clear path of what's going to happen? Because I think this is where my paradigm as a relationship anarchist starts to be really important and interesting, because no matter what you do, we all have multiple relationships, right? I hate to break that to people. And I think, I have a relationship to my friends. I have a relationship to my mother. I have a relationship to blank, 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 blank. We all have multiple relationships. So if we imagined another world, say you're in that exclusivity, right? Where it's all sort of calm and peaceful and you have everything in that you want, you are still going to have other friends. And what if you also introduced sex into those dynamics and it stayed almost relatively the same, right? I think that's where people start to panic. Would it? I don't know. Could it stay the same, right? I think that people automatically assume that introducing sexual dynamics means that someone's going to leave you, especially if they've experienced that in the past. Things
So
are
there's a failure of the imagination that if you do introduce sex somehow it's complicated, it's messy, it's not simple, and it will introduce uh, problems, and sex makes it all different. It's not just like other friends.
right, which I think is a reflective of a certain paradigm around sexuality and purity culture, right? Because in past consciousnesses of myself, I couldn't even fathom having sex that was play. And I don't mean in the sense of friends with benefits. I don't talk to this person. We just fucking goodbye. I mean people that I actually love, that I
You just want to
see
play with. Yeah.
once a month. And I wouldn't even say just play. Like, it is play and love and intentionality, but
Yeah.
it is not full life merging. This is not someone that I am talking to every day. This is not someone I'm seeing this is someone that I
Mhm.
see once a month, or these people I see once a year, or these people I see every couple of weeks. I
Mhm.
think it's just what do you want in that security of the exclusivity?
Mhm.
Right? And what is it that you're seeing? And what is this other world that could be possible? And also, if someone wants exclusivity, honoring that, right? Like, what does it mean to also honor that if that feels like a narrative of importance and significance, right? As much as I respect the person who chooses to be celibate for God, right? These are all important meaning makings and narratives. It wouldn't be ethical for me to come and try and deconstruct someone's concept of the three-letter word
Yeah.
God. You know what I mean? Where you're just like, hey, I
Yeah.
hear you, and that's important, you know?
Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that okay, first starting with the baseline, like, is the person open-minded to have the conversation, or is it just like, I'm looking for monogamy, I'm into the God stuff, and that's
Right.
me. That's who I
Right.
am. But if the person is like having conversations and is open-minded, you're naming a failure of imagination. And the failure of imagination is essentially like you have a projection, a meaning making into the future, that if I introduce sex with friendship, with other people where I might see them once a month or once every 2 weeks or whatever that is, but it is not this like big love relationship that I want with you, as an example, that you can't imagine anything but complexity, and you're failing to imagine serenity, joy, and peace. You're just leaning into the imagination of, I call it an omen, by the way, with my
Mm-hmm.
clients, the anatomy of conflict, the anatomy of like meaning making. Like, what is it's made up of OMEN. You're making an observation, you're generating a meaning, which is followed by an emotion, often tied to younger wounded parts, and then a perception that a core human need won't get met.
Sure.
So in this case, the failure of imagination might be to just be like, oh, well, I'm seeing this idea that you want to be open. Okay, that's the observation. The meaning is, I don't like it. The emotion is unsafe. But what other younger wounded parts or meanings that you've attached yourself to are driving the meaning into this is untenable,
Right.
this won't work, I'm not safe, I'm not seen, I'm not loved, my core human needs will not get met. And there's a failure of imagination to say, what are some other observations, other potential meanings? Could
Mm-hmm.
it be that nothing is really wrong and that my partner has this variety, but I'm still the focal point for raising a family, prioritize in terms of time and resources?
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible? Let me imagine that possibility. And that's the challenge, is helping people imagine a different projection into the
Right.
future.
Yeah, which is so hard to do because where do I get models of this? And I think that's one of the big shifts for me is stepping into a community where this is a lot of what people do, where I see nesting partners that are living together, that are raising kids in a polyamory dynamic, and also have these other partners and are doing it in a way that is honoring people. They're not having veto powers. They're not just blanketly like I'm in a backyard at a baby shower with a poly couple. There's their partner's there, their other partner's there. We're all in the backyard, and there's a respect for this couple that is having the child. And also the other couples are there, the other partners are there. We're all in the backyard. Like it is great. And there's a sense of because I think there's a lot of dynamics about hierarchy, right? And I understand the critiques on hierarchy in terms of the ways that people are blatantly hurt in dynamics where someone will veto and then it's absolutely over, or just using the power of couple privilege to completely demolish the respect for another human being. However, when you live into this reality, we have limited time and energy. So no matter what I do, I cannot build deep, significant relationships with an abundance of people. Love is abundant, but time and energy is not, okay? And so when I'm thinking about how I want to build this life, there is a much smaller net of the people that are close to me. And if you want to do that in a throuple dynamic where you live in all, right? That's one world where you all live together. There's another world where maybe you're nesting with one person, having kids, right? And then building deep, respectful dynamics with other people that aren't as frequency of orbits of seeing that person because you're not living with that person. And I don't think that that means you're doing hierarchy in a shitty way. Think about how we do that with friendships in general. Often people will have a best friend, and that doesn't mean that we are shitty to the rest of our friends and our dynamics, but it means there's might be someone that you see a lot, you spend the majority of your time to, and you connect with that person, right?
Mm.
So I think that there are ways where when someone really, and I'm certainly there, really craves a deep partnership with one person and other people, both are possible, but it's really hard to see that world until I'm in the back of a baby yard, until I'm in the backyard of a baby shower with a poly couple that's doing this and has all their other partners that orbit at less frequencies than that main couple in the backyard, all loving and supportive. And then I say, wow, I could also do this.
So you have the models where other people don't. And it's like
Yeah.
it's like you know, other planetary for them. This does not exist. And they hear all the stories, they
Yep.
see all the like this person I'm referring to has experienced dating couples or dating somebody who's solo poly and hearing about the other woman's struggle.
Right.
And like, I don't want to be that other woman. Like, why
Mm-hmm.
would I want to sign up for that in my primary relationship? I want simplicity. And so they don't get to hear this kind of statistics that maybe Elizabeth Sheff puts out about in her book, the Polyamorous Next Door, or you living this and actually having, would you say, a lot of serenity in your life?
Yeah. I feel like I think that's the tricky thing is I have so much more security because I know what the rates of infidelity are.
What are the
I
rates of fidelity, by the way? I heard Esther Perel say 26 to 75%,
I
depending on,
know.
right? Depending on what you call infidelity. I'm like, what is that statistic? Yeah.
Yeah, right. I think that's exactly. I've heard her all the way up to 70, which, okay, let's just give her that 25 to 70. Let's ballpark somewhere in the middle of 40 to 50. Are you fucking kidding me? How do you feel secure in that? How can you possibly feel secure in 40 to 50% that your partner is gonna
A
let
one
a
in two chance. Well, what?
let alone the world that when you are in monogamy, do you know how many books think about mating in captivity? Think about Emily Nagassi's new book, Come Together, right? The amount of books that talk about bed death, the struggles of erotic desire. How the hell are you supposed to feel secure in a 40 to 50% chance of infidelity and the other world of eroticism dying? You know what feels really secure? That my partner talks to me when they have erotic desire for another person, and that we communicate on such a deep level, and that our relationship is so secure that I'm not worried about them leaving me.
Mm,
And if they do, it is under the context that they have found someone, or myself, because I think women particularly fall into this category of my partner will never leave me or they will leave me. Don't forget that you can leave that person too, my friend.
yeah.
In the world of them or myself leaving and no longer wanting this connection, it is only under the paradigm of finding such deep pleasure with another person that I have to move or they have to move. And if I really love them, what world would it be to say, wow, you found this other person that you're really connected with?
Now I'm going to kill you.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, and
What it
I'm taking your kids away from you.
is
And
that love?
let's go to war. No, it's not love. Yeah. Another like way that I describe it is, we're spending $50 billion on an industry that brings us together in front of all of our friends and family to make these wedding vows of forsaking all others, happily ever after. And you look at that $50 billion industry and the wedding vows that we make, and then there's a $50 billion divorce industry, right? And then, so I think the last statistic I heard was say around 56% of adults will divorce. But then you have to layer on 10 to 15%, give or take, of people that don't divorce, but practiced infidelity,
Right.
right? So there's the carrying, even if they never find out, their partner never finds out, you're carrying the shame and the guilt of lying to your best friend, to your life partner. All right, fine. Then you got people who stay together, don't cheat. Another 10 to 15% will do that, but they're sexless or loveless
Right.
in their relationship, right?
Right.
And what? Like 80 to 90%, and you're spending an average of $26,000 on a wedding in America, are spending $26,000. Are they not aware that the odds of them breaking these vows, that they're not going to be together forever, forsaking all others, happily ever after? Just like, would you, if your kid came to you and said, I found this amazing college, I can't wait to do it, I want to go to this school, and guess what? They have like an 80-90% failure rate. Most of the kids will drop out 80 to
Yeah.
90% in the first year. But it's 26 grand. As
Right.
a parent, would you say, yeah, go to that college? I love the statistics, 80 to 90%. Yeah, let's do that. Oh,
Right.
and by the way, I forgot to mention that if I do end up, dropping out of this school, there's a fee of about $20,000, legal bills, right? There's
Right.
a fee that you have to pay after to leave the school.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just
Totally.
like, and that's safety. Wow. And failure of imagination to understand where security really comes from. Wow.
I think that's where I feel secure. But here's the thing, though, is you
Yeah.
can know all of this cognitively, which is what I reached to of looking at the stats, looking at the research, looking at all of this. And the first time your partner kisses another person, losing my shit
Shit.
and
Yeah.
just having a full trauma reaction.
And all the
And
data goes out the window. And you're like, no, 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 no. I've got a 5% chance. I've got a 10% chance. I'm going to go with that.
I know. And so I think that's where it's like, okay, now we can talk about somatic work, we can talk about exposure therapy. And I think, again, talking about the paradigms, we can't blame ourselves for having a failure of imagination because it's the reality of the water we're swimming in, right? When I am working with clients who are in domestic abuse and situations like that, they can't even imagine a situation of security, of love, of something that is way better. And so often, there's stagnancy and staying in that place for so many different reasons of safety and complexity and resources. But the imagining of another world of security and love is not possible, let alone it can be frightening. Right? Talk about all the people that have been in abusive dynamics, complex dynamics, and then get into a secure dynamic and it feels boring, right? There's so much here about our paradigm of relationships where we can be in this one space, but imagining the other feels so impossible until you take the baby steps of feeling into this world. And so that couple that I was talking about that had the baby shower, they also got married recently, which was an interesting thing, right? As someone who has deconstructed so much of that world, but their vows included their other partners. Their other partners were a part of the ceremony. And at one point in the vows, they specifically looked to all of us in the ceremony and said, and we also believe in the power of community to support this family that is being built. And so will all of you in the crowd take a vow with us. And in context, this is a couple that I had dated in my own past, but because they're such beautiful people, we have stayed in connection from a sexual erotic into a platonic world. And I'm still friends with these people. And so I'm just in such a different paradigm of people where when eroticism changes, you maintain the relationship, you stay in deep community, you navigate those complexities. And previous consciousness of self couldn't even fathom that world.
Wow. Yeah, this is all really such a great exchange. And thank you for this sort of the advice of like, okay, a failure of imagination. What else can we imagine into the future? What can we vision into the future that's possible? How can we take some baby steps to see? Because you don't know what you don't know. You just have the projection. You've never even experienced an open primary relationship ever. So what could that look like? Could it be safer than these statistics of breakup/divorces that break up, homes with kids in them, the infidelity piece, and the eventual potential boredom that can come for either of us. We're going to change in the next 3 years. So, yeah, you mentioned the first time your partner kisses somebody else, the trauma response is like, well, what in the world do we do with that?
Yeah, I have so much to say.
What's the solution? What's the solution for that?
Well, I think first let's go back to what I had said about me and purity culture, right? So the narratives of all of that. When I was on the floor crying, thinking that no one would ever want me, that was a trauma response, right? The narratives of what I had been sold and told about God and all of that was hitting my body, and I was crying to such a level that I was definitely
you were going to hell. You were going to hell.
Yeah, and no one would ever want me. So of course I was having a significant reaction in my body of just this deep, I just remember crying from my gut, like, whoa. Right. And so when I am moving through all of these different paradigms, I've always held on to that of, wow, okay, the narratives of what I was told were so deep in me. What narratives am I being told now? Right. But I think that can be hard to hold on to because even when we did all the math, we did all the research, I can see this clear path. But right, I am so scared. And so what I always talk about is working first from the body, because what happens when you're in a trauma response is you've moved away from your prefrontal cortex, your executive thinking, into your amygdala. And now we are not in the rational part of our brain. And so you have to first work with that before trying to find a solution cognitively. So I created, an acronym called CALM, right? Can you center yourself with a deep breath? Can you assess your body, right? And can you take the time to be able to move that energy out, to be able to locate, where it is in the body? And once you've done that work, now we're in a calm state. Now we're back in the prefrontal cortex. Now we can unpack, which is where I wrote about my psychedelic jealousy guide. So I do a lot of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy work, and people always want to have a good trip, right? People want to have a great trip on the psychedelic. Okay, you know what makes a good trip? A good set and setting. So then that's where I start to help people unpack the set and setting. What are the narratives around security, the narratives around love? What are the setting that you're in? What's this relationship? Because if this person is giving you breadcrumbs, like a psychedelic, which is a non-specific amplifier, the second you have that person kiss someone else, you're going to be enraged because all of those moments of frustration will be amplified so much so that you're going to feel all of it, right? And so sometimes it's not even you. Sometimes it is the relationship that you're in. Or even, I think one of the biggest things for me in terms of setting was the other relationships I had around me. When I was first stepping into polyamory and I only had one person that was really doing this, it was so hard to fathom sharing that person because that was my one source of love and connection. As I've built multiple around me, do you know how much easier it is to share water when you have multiple flowing sources rather than a very thin trickle of water and you're thirsty in a dry desert of affection? Of course, I'm not going to share that love. Are you kidding me? Right? To feeling abundance and overflow, to being like, yeah, go for it. I'm fine. That's a whole different paradigm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh God, when I hear you talk, I get chills because
Ah,
here we are, we barely know each other, right?
yeah.
And you might even be further ahead than me, but with all these acronyms and these models that you're working with, I'd love to share a little bit about the secure open protocol
Sure.
because it's so similar to what you just shared. It's so
Yeah.
neat that you and I can be on like no contact with each other and we're developing the same kind of a similar model.
Sure.
Oh, it's so neat. You gotta
Isn't
love that.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, they're really quick. So, five pillars, five key ingredients to the SOP, the Secure Open
Mm-hmm.
Protocol, and they all work in symbiosis with each other, right? The first is communication, and I joke that polyamory is like the Olympics of relationships, and that you can't bring college or high school level communication skills to the Olympics. So what does that look like? And like your description, I use my hands. I know your listeners might not be able to see it, but like here's our prefrontal cortex, right? One partner is going into dysregulation. They flip their lid. They're not in their prefrontal cortex. They're in lizard brain, in their
Yep.
amygdala, where all their trauma
Right.
is stored. The partner comes in and they're like, with all the good intentions, they're like, hey, I'm logical. So the logical brain and the lizard brain don't get along, and they start to listen, to fix, to respond, to defend themselves. It's like such a pattern of communication that we've all been
Right.
taught. Like we're bringing in the skills of past generations who have mostly practiced monogamy and trying to apply it here. So this person's got their lid flipped, and this person keeps trying this. They don't get along. They're on two different frequencies. This person gets dysregulated enough that they say something mean enough that flips this lid.
Mm-hmm.
And now you got two lizard brains, two crocodiles in the swamp. Oh, fun. That's the best kind. So we teach you how to emotionally attune. I mentioned Omen earlier, understanding the anatomy of conflict, observations,
Mm-hmm.
meanings, emotions, and needs. And the Spark method that I created is a specific communication platform or blueprint that walks them through the space holding, asking for consent to even talk, asking for presence, doing the breath work like you and I
Right.
did, affirming your love, and then naming the subject in a neutral way, and then going into like detective mode. Instead of listening to respond, fix, and defend yourself, you're listening to listen. You're slowing everything down. You're being tantric in your communication, and you're just taking on the role of the space holder for your partner to express what they're seeing, thinking, feeling, and needing. And now you're building deep, deep into me, you see
Right.
intimacy with your partner. You have a rupture. We're all going to have disagreements, but are you repairing well? That's where the gold is. Can you
Mm-hmm.
repair in a way where you don't have to defend yourself? You can take 10, 15 whole minutes
Sure.
and just reflectively listen and slow everything down. And I do this for a living, and I sometimes can't do that. And I need to
Sure.
call myself in. It's not
Yeah.
easy, but we need these patterns of communication to change for us to play at these levels of relating. So that's pillar one. But pillar two, you started speaking about it. We've got 30 practitioners now who specialize in trauma healing and nervous system regulation, modality we have on our team is PSIP, psychedelic somatic interactional psychotherapy. Now clients are being absolute, they're using the struggle of open to go and do the most transformative healing on themselves. And all of a sudden, the relationship gets better. The open struggles are lessened. Well, duh, the relationship is only going to be as good as the well being of the individuals. So, we throw everything at it, like whatever, different strokes for different folks, right? Like IFS, brain
Sure.
working recursive therapy, psychedelic assisted therapy, microdosing education, sexual trauma healing with intimacy and
Sure.
sexual healers, like whatever we've turned over all the rocks and brought together the team. So pillar 2 is that deep dive into yourself, where pillar 1 is like the outer work, pillar 2 is the inner work,
Sure.
and you have to go and excavate, you have to go in deep. Otherwise you can communicate great, but you're still trying to climb Mount Everest without the right gear and without the right training. And then you come to pillar 3, which is the strategy. The problem is that most people come to us, I'm sure, they're like, help us write agreements, give us the strategies, give us the best practices. And they're missing the point that you're going to be in a spin cycle if you try to solve things from that place. Let's put those 2 horses before that cart. Let's level up our communication and then heal deeply as individuals. And then when we show up for that strategy conversation of our intentions and agreements, well, now we're so much more resourced. Every conversation is infinitely easier. All
Right.
those deal breakers and non-starters are not so deal breaky and non-startery, right? Like all of a sudden you're like, just go have an overnight. I'm good. Like things really can shift. And then we bring in the cherries on top, which is 100 exclusive workshops with people like Jessica Fern and Elizabeth
Sure.
Sheff, all these experts. And then the 9,000 member community where people can go in and get peer support from a polysecure kind of group that embraces jealousy and insecurity and anxiety for the poly anxious crowd, right? So that's the having a 9,000 member community that isn't going to judge you for not feeling compersion, isn't going to judge you for having insecurities. In some groups, they'll tell you, why are you doing this? Go back to being monogamous. And that's
Some
like really hurtful. It's
some
like,
therapists will say that to their clients. I've
oh,
seen that one. I'm gonna tell you.
yeah, that's so damaging, right? Because you're
Yes.
in love with this human being. You don't want to leave this human being. And then you're thrown in there the idea that, well, just get out. Oh yeah, I can just get out. I've got 3 kids with this person. I've got a life. I still love them. Just get out. Easy for you to say. I'm like, yeah, divorce is fucking easy. I'm gonna sink my whole fleet of ships, my friendship with them, my parental. Wow, I'm getting chills talking about this.
Yeah.
Sorry for being so passionate, but like, I'm gonna sink
Fair.
my allyship, my parentalship, my assetship, all because the lovership wants to sail in a little bit of a different direction. You're telling me I have to go sink this. Thanks for the advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's damaging.
Yeah, right. And you sit in a positionality, I sit in a positionality where if a therapist said that to us, we'd say, no, you're wrong. But do you know how many people don't? Previously, before I was in this world of becoming a therapist, you look to a psychologist and therapists like they're gods almost, like they have all the insight into the human psyche, and you should trust every single word that they say. And so when a therapist comes in and says, yeah, well, why don't you leave? This is just clearly not working for you. That will impact someone significantly.
Yeah, well, that's a person that knows their shit. They understand psychology. They went to
Right.
school and that
Right.
sticks there. Like, well, I got that advice. Like, wow, what a wrench to throw into the machine, right?
Totally. It reminds me of a story. I don't name names, but when I was training in school, there was someone who's like a main person of emotion focused therapy. And she had this whole paradigm on couples work and couples work and couples work. And me being the rebel that I am in class, I'm just, raising my hand. I'm like, hey, doctor, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm curious about if this could be adapted to polyamorous relationships out of just a couple dyad, to which she says, you know, in my clinical work, that actually never works. Every single couple I know, every single couple that does that, it's one that wants it and the other one that doesn't. So I've never seen it work. To which I stood up and said, you know what? That's actually not what I've seen in the community. I've seen couples that thrive in this for decades. The reality is, you don't have them in your office because they don't need your help. But the
Oh my God,
fact,
what a point. My God, like how could somebody who's like a scientist who says they do clinical studies of stuff ignore the bias that their own bias?
totally. And the fact that then she's a power dynamic, right? She's in front of a classroom as the professor. There's a whole room of students who have now just been told that. Let alone, it was really fascinating to read some research recently that it was interesting. It broke down monogamy versus non-monogamy, but then in the non-monogamy world, it broke it down between open, swinging, and poly. And so it was interesting. Open dynamics had less relationship satisfaction than monogamy, which I found very interesting. Swinging was the same, and then polyamory was more relationship satisfaction than monogamy. And then sexually, open relationships were the same as monogamy. Swinging was higher, and then poly was higher than monogamy. So poly got higher on both, right? And essentially what I found from that research is shit. All of our studies that are trying to look at it between this binary of monogamy and non-monogamy are telling us kind of nothing, because when you get into non-monogamy, there's a very big camp of polyamory, swinging, open, and they all have very different rates of satisfaction. You can imagine communication skills, maybe, et cetera, et cetera. And so even all the research we have right now, which often puts that non-monogamy has more sexual satisfaction than monogamy, even that, we got to take a big question mark to that, because non-monogamy is way too big of an umbrella to be just saying, here we go, we have to get into, let alone I've never seen a study on relationship anarchist, my dear community, right? We have no data on any of this to really know. And what we do know is that the different types of non-monogamy have very different rates of satisfaction.
Yeah.
Oh,
And then there's so much, then you can take the data and parse it even more, right? Because you can take those categories, but what about overlaying the skills gap in communication? I always say it's not about monogamy versus non-monogamy. It's about who are you doing it with?
right,
Are they, you know, skilled communicators? Have they addressed their traumatology that they're bringing into this relationship, whether it's mono, open, swingy, or poly? Like, are you carrying tons of abandonment,
right,
rejection, and neglect trauma that you're
right,
bringing into these different styles? And that's a huge factor. If you
right.
you got to control for that if you're doing a real study,
Mm-hmm.
right? What
Absolutely.
what's the skills gap? What's the healing gap? Is this a conscious relationship? Because all the toxicity of monogamy can easily transfer with certain people to
Right.
non-monogamy. So how do we control for those variables?
Right. Yeah. I think that's why I come back to that psychedelic metaphor. It's not like psychedelics are going to heal you. I want to be very clear. Psychedelics are a tool that, in the right set and setting with the right community, you can find healing. Non-monogamy will not fix all of your relationship problems. In fact, like a psychedelic, it's probably going to amplify them, and you're going to have to look at them a lot harder, right? And so just because you take a psychedelic does not mean that you are more emotionally aware, more enlightened. In fact, you find extremist groups that take psychedelics and feel more in, enraged to feel like completely enforce that paradigm of their reality. And so it's not non-monogamy, it's not the psychedelic. It, like we're saying, it's the community. Do you have the community that is practicing these skills? Like that couple that I was talking about where I dated them and we transitioned into friends. And you know what? That couple, somatic therapist. The
Uh,
amount of therapist and poly couple, oh, it is all around me.
is it true that, because it's funny, just today I spoke to someone who's like, oh, don't do poly with a psychologist. They're the worst at it.
Hey man, I don't know. I
What
mean,
what's what are you seeing? Are you seeing a ton of therapists and
yeah,
yeah, that are
yeah.
making it work? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about under systems of capitalism and the way that my 40 hours a week is spent communicating about emotions and even dealing with difficult clients that activate me in significant ways that I have to learn how to say, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to separate your projections from my projections and communicate. So, under the system of capitalism, if that is your job, you are literally training in skills. And there's a lot of therapists and psychologists that also suck. Let's be real. But for the most part, you're treat. Let's be real.
Tell me how you really feel. Don't hold back.
There's a lot of them that, there's a lot of coaches that are way more informed than psychologists that I've seen. I'll just say that, it's a system. But in general, if under capitalism, right? So if you are a healer, a coach, a therapist, and you are spending all of your time in a paradigm of communication, body awareness, healing, you are actively working on the skills that we're talking about, which are needed to deconstruct the internalization of mononormativity. It's not for the faint of heart in this current day and age. But you know what? Future generations, oh, they're going to be running in liberation we can't even fathom.
Oh
Sims,
my
the
God.
game?
No.
So, you like play with little people
Yeah,
and
I've
you get
heard
to,
of it.
okay.
Yeah.
The newest edition has polyamory in it. So tell me,
What?
yes. So tell me as a kid, you're playing that as a kid. Oh, right. Okay. I'm in middle school. Oh, my people can have multiple people. Oh, okay. They're going to hit an age
I love that.
and never even doubt the thing. And I think, just to be clear, we've also seen a lot of that with the queer movement, right? How many people in their older age can't even fathom the idea of queerness because of such large systems that younger kids are coming out queer from the gate saying, of course I love all these different
Yeah.
people, in
Yeah.
ways that we can't even fathom depending on your generational
Yeah.
location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great conversation.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about it. Is it, I don't want to put it in the frame, but my own trauma response, right? Coming from purity culture, there's been such an itch to get out of such a restrictive frame. And so such a fervor to get out. And so we run with that passion for sure.
Yeah, we do. We do.
Yeah.
Ah, yeah. So, yeah, I think that the only thing I can add before we land this beautiful plane that we're on,
Mm-hmm.
is that these five critical questions that are part of the strategy pillar are really good questions for, I think, your listeners to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the first is to have a deeper conversation around why you're choosing this. Like, if you're
Yeah.
just doing it without the clarity of why, you don't have your North Stars. So I often will use Tony Robbins' 6 core human needs. Let's look at your needs. And can you articulate to me in more certain ways how this will make you feel safer? And what you said earlier about, this like failure of imagination of what safety can look like when the statistics are so clear. Well, fuck, this just safer. It makes sense scientifically. All right, fine. What about this need to feel more significant? Well, shit, if you have multiple people showering you with significance, you are feeling more significant, right? Love is the third core need, variety, growth, service. These 6 core human needs, now I understand after doing this for 15 years that all my jars get filled. And I want my clients to have that conversation with themselves and with each other with my guidance. So that's the first question. Why are you doing it? Second question is, who are you doing it with? Like,
Right.
can we understand our younger wounded parts? Are we doing the big healing work? Are we just showing up with these younger wounded parts completely unresolved and throwing caution to the wind and expecting that, like, yeah, we're just going to talk things out and everything will be fine? No, these young wounded parts will come out of shadow, grab the wheel of your bus, and swerve away, and it'll become a very dysfunctional situation if you ignore it. The third question, that to your point earlier, love is infinite and time is finite,
Right.
right? The nervous system has but so much, flexibility. What else is happening in your life? Do you have aging parents? Are you having health issues? Are you raising kids? Are you starting a business? Like be realistic. And then based on the answers to the first three questions, 1 + 2 + 3, it's like a formula, equals number 4. Which style of non-monogamy do you choose? There's like
Right.
20 styles we talk about. And then how do you even customize that style to fit your current situation? It's a custom job. It's not oh, well, I guess we're swingers. That's all we're going to talk about. No, like within swinging, what exactly are your intentions and agreements.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last question is, how do you thrive? Who are you choosing, Nicole or Shai, as your guides, as the experts to give you the right mindsets, to be trauma informed, to give you a protocol or whatever it is to really not go and try and DIY this thing? I haven't seen the study, but have you ever Googled open marriage failure rates? The
No.
answer is 92%. I,
Mm,
I haven't seen the study. I don't trust it, but I can see how it's high.
right.
Because if you just willy-nilly DIY this thing, for many people, and that's why we have clients, it's hard. It's
Right.
really, really hard. Getting
Absolutely.
support. I love clients that come to me in the beginning before they
Right.
fall into the pitfalls.
Right. Yeah, we come to prepare for the psychedelic journey. There's obviously you could do integration after a bad trip, yes, but in all ideal circumstances, you're coming to that person beforehand to prepare, like you're saying, to set your intention because there are definitely going to be points where you say, what is reality anymore? This is a very new land that I have never traversed before in my entire life, right? Where is my grounding? Where is my person? And I think through a lot of my work with this, I want to invite all of the listeners who are on this journey to celebrate themselves wherever they're at. Oh, so many of my clients are, I want compersion. I want this. I want this. I want that. I still have so much to go. I still have so much to go. We are going to be living our lives till the end, still unpacking purity culture, horror phobia, all of these systems, right? To the end of our lives. So, in that journey, what does it mean to look back and see how far you've come? See all the journey because we're so often looking to the future, forgetting all the, moments that we've already grown through. And so,
Yeah.
maintaining that balance. And I do think that there is a way to do this that is desire and pleasure focused, right? What is the desire out of this? What is the pleasure that you will experience through this? And then how can we exposure therapy microdose this? Okay. We don't need to do the big psychedelic dose where you lose your face and have no idea what reality is. What's the small step? Been there. What's the small step where you still feel tethered to reality and grounded? And then at that point, you establish a trust with the medicine. This is how we work with clients, right? And then you do a little bit higher if you want to. Or maybe you find that sweet dose where it feels so good right there and you're content. You can look at the other people that are tripping super high and say, hey, that's fine. I am so happy right here. Right. But there's a way to do this that is pleasure based. And I think that part of that pleasure based reality is also that growth is uncomfortable. If you think that you're going to step into polyamory and there's not going to be moments of discomfort, you're never going to get anywhere. And that's not how life works. You want to run a marathon? That first mile, it sucks. It sucks. That first time you try to cook, that dish had too much salt. The first time you try to touch your toes, you're so far away, right? And so I think that people have to understand that there is an edge of pushing and staying regulated, but still pushing yourself and pushing and having joy in that challenge, right? So it doesn't have to be all or nothing big dose and just getting there. How can you take the smaller doses, the doses of pleasure with a little bit of push? Pleasure, push, pleasure, push, and staying regulated. It's
Wow.
possible.
Wow, you are brilliant,
Ah,
by the way.
thank you.
It's such a pleasure talking to you. Wow.
Um,
Ah, yeah, so
yeah,
many synergies. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you
of
for
course.
having me. Thank you for
Of
this
course.
really rich conversation. I hope to stay in touch, see if there's
Totally.
collaborations in the future. But this was really enjoyable. Thank you.
Yeah, such a joy. Well, as we close out our time together, I will take a deep breath with you again. And then I'll just check in to see if there's anything else that you wanted to share with the listeners. Otherwise, I can guide us towards a closing question.
Yeah, no, I'm feeling pretty complete.
Good. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
So then the one question that I ask everyone on the show is, what is one thing that you wish other people knew was more normal?
It's a tough question. I don't know
Mhm.
why it's tough. I mean, I guess that, like what I experienced, like having multiple heat-loving humans, more than two, living in the
Mm,
household with kids, that it's normal. Like there aren't sex parties. There aren't like kids aren't being damaged. It's very normal. It's just like a nuclear family, just more support for the kids, right?
Mhm.
More support for the system. When one person gets sick from COVID, one person isn't bearing the brunt of the household by themselves. There's other humans to support, one to drive the kid to practice and the other to run to the pharmacy and get the medication, like normal
Right.
shit. Like
Right.
that's one thing I think people should know, that it can actually be even better than normal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm thinking about Sex at Dawn. I'm thinking about the book How Love Conquered Marriage. If you go back historically, this was normal, right? And I think we forget that sometimes. It's just before all of the agricultural revolution, before the plow, before all of the building of private property, we were in a very different community landscape that reflects more of what you're saying right now.
Yeah, that's what I always called it. Like, I want to build a modern day hunter-gatherer tribe, right? We still have to go to work and drive our cars and all these things, but why not bring in the essence of these old, beautiful communal systems that we come from, that we still see
Mhm.
in indigenous tribes that have been untouched, mostly untouched by us, by modern
Right,
society.
right, right.
Yeah.
I know. I remember talking to someone about this this paradigm. They were a researcher, a biologist of some sort. And they were like, "You're right. I guess maybe we could raise kids in a poly world." And I just had to pause and I was like, we just have to pause and talk about the lack of cultural awareness in this moment here because there are actively cultures that do this. It's not a question of could we. There are actively cultures around the world that do this and have for centuries. Oh my God, right? So it's expanding out from our white Western perspective to see more of what is possible and just yeah, so much of our conversation speaks to the vulnerability of that journey and the need for community, the need for support. But I am just so excited for future generations that are going to grow up in a world that is so different than this.
Gosh, don't even get me started on ugh, like the rates of suicide and depression and anxiety, and how we've gone from the tribe to the extended big family on the farm to the nuclear family to an
Right,
epidemic of singledom, of single
right,
parents. Like something like 40+% of women in America will deliver a child as a single parent. Like, what in the actual F is
right.
that? Like, we're so far removed from our origins and our nature. And yeah, I think that poly can be the glue that binds us together. It
Mhm.
brings a different dynamic. And KTP, specifically KTP is so beautiful. My gosh, yeah. It can lead us back to our roots, right? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's such a joy to have you on the podcast today. Such a pleasure. Yeah.
For having me. I'm so grateful.
Yeah. And before I let you go, I want to make sure I hold some space for you to plug all of your resources for the listener who has connected with you and your work. Where can they find you?
Oh, well, yeah. Leveled Up Love is everywhere. Leveleduplove.com. On there, you can even add a slash and put in a webinar. We have got a free webinar for you. That's on the website. On all the socials like Instagram and TikTok, you can find Leveled Up Love. And then we've got our beautiful 9,000 member community on Facebook, a private group called Leveled Up Love. So that's the best ways to find us. Thank you for letting me share about that.
Of course. Yeah, I'll have all of that linked in the show notes below so people can find you and your communities. And yeah, thank you again for coming on to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. If you enjoyed today's episode, then leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. And head on over to modernanarchypodcast.com to get resources and learn more about all the things we talked about on today's episode. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all next week.